Hello and welcome. My name is Sharon and this is Trio.of.Witches Tarot. It's April 23rd and it snowed this morning here, so it's cold and I'm wearing a sweater. I'll be doing a walkthrough and side-by-side comparison of the Awakening and regular editions of the Ember Aura Tarot by Jamie Richardson. I'll follow that up with a look at a couple of my favorite tarot books, and then finally, I'll walk you through an interpretation of a personal reading using the Ember Aura Tarot. So this is the Awakening edition, and this is the regular edition. They both come with a little white book, which is pretty nice. Talks about how Jamie came to create this deck and interpretations of the cards. Don't think you need me to go through what a little white book is. They each are gilded pink. One, the Awakening, is a brighter pink, and this is more of a rose gold pink. They're bigger cards. It doesn't bother me, I have big hands, but it is bigger than the Centennial RWS. So the main difference, besides the font, which you can see here, is very different, is that the Awakening is much more blue, I think, and the regular is more yellow. So I'm just going to start flip through the cards. You can see for yourself the differences in colors. Love this Empress. I love that she has the roses. The Emperor is very modern day. So there are some Christian overtones in this deck. So that may bother you. It doesn't bother me. This seems very Christ-like to me. Reminds me a lot of the statue in Rio de Janeiro. But the message of Jesus still holds for me, so I'm okay with that. Although I do really love the more purpley in the regular edition, I do appreciate the blue. I really love both editions of this deck. And I love this death card. The Star card is one of my favorite of the whole tarot, and I love this one. And I think this is just a really profound moon card. I think I like this one better. This one's a little green to me. And I've heard some people complain that the people in this deck are like impossibly thin, like bordering on sickly thin. But I feel personally they aren't really representing a person, and generally I would agree with that statement that they were too thin. It doesn't bother me in this deck. So I don't feel like they're supposed to be representing people. So there's a good example. I mean, obviously, if this was a real person, they would be anorexic. Again, it doesn't bother me. I love this Nine of Wands. So this is the one card that is totally different in the two decks. And the daughters are the pages. And the sons are the knights. And the diviners are the queens. And the sages are the kings. But the kings are women in this deck. It's a very female-centric deck. I do like the more blue in the Awakening edition, especially in the Suit of Cups. I like that the water is blue rather than purple, which it is in the regular edition. I think this is a really cool representation of the Five of Cups. Love the moons in this deck. I like the way the suns are in frames in this. I haven't noticed if the other diviners have third eyes or not. Pay attention to that when I get to the next suit. This card's so peaceful to me. I like it so much better than the RWS. It always seems like someone is dead to me rather than resting. This almost feels like a Three of Swords. And I do like that the Three of Swords here isn't stabbing a heart. I find it interesting that in the Five, it is stabbing a heart. It's an interesting interpretation of the Eight of Swords being trapped. This is one of the cards that I find the most similar between the two editions. This one is bluer, but they're very, very close. The Ten of Swords. Love that. There's so much joy in this card. So, no third eye. It was only in the cups, which makes sense for intuition. I like that there is some age diversity, especially in the sages. I think I like this coloration better for the coins. It's interesting to me that this doesn't really represent that hoarding that the Four of Coins normally does. And this one almost feels like it represents sadness than want, which is what I think of when I think of the Five of Pentacles. I like sewing for this one. Love that one. I do like this one better, the coloration for the 9. And this one's interesting. I almost would have preferred if she had included a male figure in this card as well. But you can see where also, if you were being inclusive of single parents, this makes total sense. And again, this age where we have the age diversity. And then in the Awakening edition, there's an extra Awakening card. So that is the side-by-side comparison and walkthrough of the 2 editions. So next I'd like to talk about a couple books that I really enjoy. The Tarot Workbook. It's my go-to book when I'm interpreting my readings. I love the way they break down like a spiritual interpretation. There's a description, what it means in a spread, there's a reverse meaning, and there's a self-development lesson, which I find super useful when I'm interpreting my reading. There is in the beginning, there's talk about the structure of the tarot, the symbolism of numbers. There is a little more in depth on the court cards and associations. Talks about tarot and astrology. I don't really know much about astrology, so I don't really use this part, but I think it would be useful when I do get into it. Talks about the Tree of Life, where the majors are on the Tree of Life. I had a dream about the Tree of Life the other night. That's funny. So then it goes through all the majors. I color-coded the edges of the book. And then it just has a really nice description for every single card. So even the minors do have a whole page. So that is the Tarot Workbook by Nevill Drury. Sorry if I hacked that. I highly recommend this one. And then there, excuse me, is the Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination by Robert M. Place. This is amazing. It goes through the whole history of the tarot. It breaks down and busts some myths about the roots of tarot. It talks about the Tree of Life and the correspondences there. Has a lot of nice tables in this book. So here we have a table that is of correspondences for the suits, the evangelist angel that is associated with it, the zodiac sign, the elements, the alchemical essence, the tetragrammaton, which I believe is the Hebrew letter, but again, I don't know much about that. And then the Kabbalistic world that it belongs to. I'm still learning all that, so I find this super, super helpful. More on the history of it. There is another table of correspondences for the Hebrew letters and the attribute of the card for all of the majors. Talks a lot about the Marseille, so this section, this chapter 4, is on interpreting the major and minor arcana, and this is about the Marseille tarot. There's another really useful table of correspondences. with the evangelists, the symbolic creature, the zodiac sign for the suit, the element, the elemental creature, the social class, which he talks a lot about in this book as part of the history, the divinatory theme, the virtue. So he talks also a lot about the virtues that are associated with the tarot, and then the Jungian psychological function, which he also goes into depth in this book. So for instance, cups are water, the theme is joy, the virtue is prudence, and the function is intuitive. For swords, it is air and justice and thinking. And for pentacles, it is earth and strength and sensation. And for wands, it is fire and temperance and feeling. Then he goes into depth on these Jungian. And then he talks about the Smith-Waite tarot. And then there is a couple pages, or single pages, for every card. It's very little on the minors, which is kind of disappointing. This feels like a little white book. But then what is the gem in this book to me is on readings. And he talks about the 6 patterns of a 3-card spread, and how you can interpret based on the way that the people in the card are facing, which I find super useful, and I refer back to this a lot, especially if I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding my reading. And he goes then, so there's a little paragraph, and then he goes in depth on each one. So you have the linear pattern and the choice pattern, the central origin pattern, the central destination pattern, the central problem pattern, the central teacher, and then he has some more exercises on practicing all of that. I'll be going into this because I'll use this when we get to the section on interpreting my reading using the Ember Aura tarot. So again, that's the Tarot History, Symbolism, and Divination by Robert M. Place. Really excellent, excellent book if you're interested in the history, or if you're interested just in that last bit on how to interpret spreads. Amazing. So before I do the reading, I want to do a little thing on a tarot quirk of mine. But it's also not necessarily like so quirky, I think, because I see a lot of people asking questions on Facebook and on Instagram about how do you shuffle big decks like this, and or how do you just start when you have a fresh deck like this. So this is all in order, and so I have like this quirky way of doing this. So I break out all the suits. And the majors. And because there's 78 cards, which can be divided evenly by the number 6. I didn't need to turn. Only turned 2 of the stacks over. So what I do is, rather than shuffling them at first, because it takes a lot of shuffling to get them really well mixed when you're starting with them in order, I make 6 piles. Maybe let's get some stuff out of the way so you can see this better. So 6 piles. And I start with the minors, and I use one suit for the first 6, and then I use the next suit. And the reason I flip 2 of them over is so that I don't have all of the quirk cards together. I know, kind of crazy. It's a quirk. And then after I have 2 minors down, then I peel out 1 row of the majors, and then I do it again with the minors. So then we have another row, so then you're going to end up with 2 left over from each suit. It's okay. And then you're going to have 4 left over from the majors. So now you have 2 from each suit and 4 from the majors. And I just divvy those out, pick one of those, and then the rest of the minors. And they are now all clumped together. So that's what I do with a brand new deck, or a deck that I've placed back in order for any reason whatsoever. And then I can shuffle it, and I only do overhand. I gave up riffle shuffling a long time ago, especially with big decks like this, where the cardstock is thicker, and I mean, even the Centennial RWS for me is kind of stiff for trying to do that. And you can. It just seems more difficult. So then I'll overhand it for a while until I feel like I'm done with it. So that, my friends, is what I do with a deck that is in order to get it out of order. Okay, so now go ahead and do a reading using the Ember and Aura Tarot and the books I went through earlier. Got my journal, got the guidebook, pencil, that's important. And I'm going to be using the Roots and Wings Oracle as well with it. If you're not familiar with that, there's a lot of walkthroughs out there on this. One, I like the backs together, and 2, I think that the artwork really complements. This is like a really great all-rounder oracle deck. So I like to use oracle and tarot together. Usually the oracle for a focus or clarification on the tarot. So get it right side up, shuffle it some. And I'll cut it with my left hand, pull out 1 card, and I usually shuffle between each card. If I had more room, I could just fan them out and pull the cards that way. There's not a lot of room right here. So then I'll usually shuffle them between each card. So this is just going to be a day ahead. No focus question other than what should I be concentrating on for my day ahead and what should I expect. That. Oh. Okay, well. Okay, so that, yeah, that's not like, those aren't cards that you always want to get. Of course, death doesn't always mean physical, literal death. I've been getting death a lot lately. In fact, the day that we had to put one of our cats down, I got the death card. So that, yeah, the death card is stalking me, especially in this deck for some reason. So let's shuffle up the roots and wings a little bit, see if we can't get some clarity around what that death could mean. The day that our cat passed away and I got death. I also got the world card from Roots and Wings, which has a rainbow in it. And if you are a pet owner and you've lost a pet, you've probably heard of the Rainbow Bridge, which is what I was thinking of when I pulled that card. So it was a very profound reading. So let's see what we get. Void. Okay, so wow. Yeah. If I was reading for someone else, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, okay, so wow. I would probably say, interesting. So, those are some cards to stare at for a second. Okay, so let's start with looking at the guidebook or the guide pamphlet for the Roots and Wings Oracle deck by Kat Riles. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You can find this on Etsy, unless due to the increased prices she's moving. So the void. An empty space can feel overwhelming and dark. This emptiness is a fantastic opportunity for possibility. So, yeah, hopefully that's going to give me some clarity around what this death card is trying to say to me. I've been through a lot of death lately. That's coming up on the 1-year anniversary of my father's passing. We lost our cat. Our neighbors lost their dog, who was partly our dog. We boarded him a lot for them when they went on vacation. So let's see what it says in here about death. How illuminating the moment when we realize how beautiful death truly is. By shedding her physical body and mind, she has become weightless and ready to be transported to her next chapter. Death is but a portal between our worlds, who we are now and who we will become. She teaches us to let go of the old, outgrown methods that keep us constrained. When we finally face death, we discover that she is our deliverer. She is the end and the beginning of all things. So, endings, beginnings, transformation, renewal, and circle of life. Then we have the Six of Swords. Rising above heartache of the recent past, the seeker has a new vantage point. Although the pain is still fresh, she is able to distance herself from it. She reflects on her recent suffering, but ahead she scans the horizon. The Six Swords support her and provide the extra edge she needs to keep her emotions at bay. Perspective, regrouping, victory, shifting, and awareness are the keywords for that one. And then we have the Nine of Swords. The seeker has reached a point where she must face her greatest fears. Twisted in the strands of her psyche are 9 deadly swords. They have tangled her hopes and dreams into a snarl of ugliness. She is now confronted with the shadows that live in the darkest recesses of her mind. Shame, doubt, fear, unworthiness, and loneliness. They must all be dealt with and subdued if she is to advance. And the keywords are nightmare of the mind, inner demons, despair, and worst fears. So, looking at these cards, I get a sense of coming through a dark night of the soul, as it were. They're all facing forward, so if we refer to the Robert M. Place book and the 6 patterns, try and figure out which pattern this might be. So the linear is the cards could show a story which could begin on the left and move to the right. It could also begin on the right and move to the left. The second one is choice, where the central figure may have his or her back toward the back of the figure on one of the flanking cards. So that doesn't apply already because they're all facing forward. The central origin, number 3, perhaps the central figure is looking directly at you or up to a higher plane. Let's see, is she? Yeah. Her eyes are actually kind of, I think, looking up. So it might be number 3. This may indicate that the action starts in the center and moves out to both sides or to one side and not the other. Look at the direction of the flanking cards. If they are moving away from the center, this is the central origin. Well, they aren't moving away, they're all facing forward. The central destination. When the central figure is looking at you, up or down, and the end figures are facing the center, they are, again, they're not, they're all facing forward. Number 5, the central problem. At times, there may be no flow of energy. The central card may be blocking the action or dispersing the energy. For example, if placed in the center, the 8 of Swords may represent a block, and the Tower may represent dispersion. So, is the 6 of Swords a blockage? I don't feel like that. And then 6 is the central teacher. The central figure may be instructional and commenting on or pointing to the 2 possibilities illustrated in the cards that flank it. So she is pointing out to both cards. So if we use the central teacher, which I think I am going to go with for now, then let's think about what that could mean and start journaling on it. Okay, so I'm going to move the cards up a little bit. And if we're viewing the 6 of Swords as the central teacher, get my journal out so I can start making some notes. So, let's look at the 6 of Swords again. So she's the central teacher, and she's talking about rising above the heartache of the recent past. So this is starting to give me some clarity around what I should be focusing on. So you can see where this book was super helpful in giving me understanding on some pretty scary cards, actually. So the central teacher is the 6 of Swords. And she's teaching me to rise above my recent dark night of the soul, rise above things that have been troubling me, about the death that has recently been around me, about that void that I've been feeling. So, yeah. So what at first seemed like a really dark, dismal, and scary reading, to be honest, turns out to be not so when you take the time to understand what the cards are saying and the positions of them and what they're doing. So I find this is comforting now, right? Rather than scary. She, my central teacher, is rising above these other two things that have been plaguing me of late. So that was a very in-depth look at the Ember and Aura Tarot, and in conjunction with the Roots and Wings Oracle, which I hope you see how using an oracle can enrich your reading with a tarot deck. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I really appreciate you coming along for the ride with me on this, which was a pretty emotional reading for me. And if you made it to the end, I'd hope you leave a butterfly emoji in the comments below, just so I know you made it this far. And stay tuned for my next video, where I should be announcing a fun deck giveaway. So thanks a lot, and really have a very, very amazing day. Bye.